Hello everyone and welcome back to another pre-recorded lesson video. I hope y'all had a nice long break. It is time to get back into it. I want to try to finish the book sometime this week or early next week. After this, we're reading chapter 5 today. After this, we should be around halfway done with the book, so I think it is possible. But let's get just right into it. The welcome activity for this lesson is a quote from chapter 5. It is saying, opinion at Booker T. Washington was sharply divided. And I just want y'all to think about that word opinion, right? What it means, an example of an opinion, what an opinion means is basically a belief that does not have to be based on facts, right? You don't need facts for it. It is basically your own personal viewpoint or your own personal perspective. So a example of an opinion is if I say the statement, McDonald's is the best fast food restaurant, right? There is no facts to back that up. It's my own personal viewpoint, right? An opinion is something that you cannot really prove, and an opinion can change over time, right? So what's the difference between an opinion and knowledge? The difference is that knowledge is based on evidence and understanding, basically facts. Opinions are not based on facts or evidence. It's your own personal viewpoint and your beliefs. Opinions can change pretty easily over time. However, knowledge over time is usually deepened or developed, right? So opinions you can change, knowledge, your own understanding gets deeper over time, right? Why I want us to focus on the word opinion is we're going to look at different and conflicting opinions on Claudette and her actions on the bus. If you've been keeping up with the videos of the person reading from the book, or if you have your own personal copy and you're reading yourself, you know, in the previous lesson, and we read chapter 4, and in chapter 4, Claudette gets arrested for not moving from her seat whenever a white person tells her to. And, you know, she's basically taking a stand against segregation on buses, right? So the focusing question for this lesson is what motivated Claudette Colvin? And the content framing question for lesson 7 is what does a deeper exploration of Claudette's actions reveal? The learning goal is we're going to analyze how conflicting responses to Claudette's actions reveal a complicated, growing sense of injustice in Montgomery. Again, I already told you that we're going to analyze conflicting responses or conflicting opinions of what people thought about what Claudette did, right? People had different opinions about it, okay? So chapter 5 is a very important chapter. It goes into her trial, what people thought about her, and the aftermath of her trial and her verdict, what the judge ruled in her case. So go into today's folder, which should be the 4-6 folder, April 6th, and watch that lesson or that read aloud video of someone reading chapter 5 if you don't have your own copy of the book. Please do that because there is going to be a major test this week over the book, and you're going to have to at least know the book a little bit. And it's not on SparkNotes or anything. So you're going to have to at least watch the video or come up to the school, pick up your copy of the book and read it while other people are as well, or as we're going along through the lessons. So take your time to do that, and then you can come back to this video whenever you want. But what this chapter is mainly about, or again, the opinions of other people about what they thought of what Claudette did and her actions on the bus. It goes into her school, random strangers on the street. Claudette sort of becomes the talk of the town, right? Everyone is starting to look at her and talk about her. And some of it's very positive, some of it's very negative. And another important thing in this chapter is a lot of important people in the civil rights movement get introduced, such as Joanne Robinson, who is the president of the Women's Political Council. She's a massive figure in the civil rights movement. Another person is Rosa Parks. She gets introduced. Hopefully we all know what Rosa Parks did. 9 months after what Claudette Colvin did on the bus, Rosa Parks does the same thing, and she becomes the face of the civil rights movement at that point. Then E.D. Nixon gets introduced. He is also a civil rights activist and a leader. He was a longtime leader of the Montgomery NAACP. Martin Luther King gets introduced briefly, and one of the more important figures, or the most important figure that gets introduced, is Fred Gray. He is also a civil rights leader. He is Claudette's lawyer that represents her in her court case. He is one of two black lawyers in Montgomery, Alabama at that time. He is a very important figure, and he does come up a lot in the future chapters. Basically, all these characters, all these people come up again in the future chapters. Okay. The most important thing, though, is that Claudette, in her court case, gets faced with three separate charges. Right. Number one is violating the segregation law. Number two is disturbing the peace. And number three is assaulting one of the police officers who pulled her off the bus. As you know, if you read chapter 4, followed along with the video, from her point of view, she does none of those things, right? She doesn't fight on the bus. She goes willingly. She basically says she went limp like a baby, right? So very conflicting points of views, and this case gets very confusing as well. Claudette is the first person ever to challenge the segregation laws of the buses in court. Usually, whenever you get pulled off the bus and arrested for violating these segregation laws, usually all you have to do is pay a fine, okay? And then you're fine and you're good to go. Claudette chooses not to pay the fine and fight these in court because she says she's not guilty. This is the first time ever that anyone has ever said that they were not guilty, that they are actually challenging the segregation laws in court. This is a massive, massive deal because, again, they finally get to challenge these laws in court. And if they win the case, then these laws, they get thrown out. Okay? So Fred Gray and a lot of the other civil rights activists are very excited about this, and they're very hopeful that they can win this case. Because again, Claudette, at age 15, is the only person in history to challenge these laws. Okay? So since she is the first person ever to do this, there's a lot of positive and negative responses to her actions, right? Some of the positives in chapter 5 is that people felt like they should take similar actions. She inspired a lot of people. She receives a letter from a man in Sacramento, California saying, "Thank you for doing what you did. You inspired me, and you made me feel sort of like a coward for not doing it earlier." So she's inspiring a lot of people. Another one is everyone was talking about Claudette at bus corners and by their lockers. You know, she's the talk of the town. Joanne Robinson, the civil rights activist I mentioned before, admired Claudette. Rosa Parks was surprised that Claudette was just a little girl. Rosa Parks, whenever she first heard of Claudette, thought she would be some big teenager that badmouthed some white people and got in trouble. Rosa Parks is very surprised to find that Claudette was a very tiny 15-year-old girl and that she's the one that stood up to the police. Fred Gray, her lawyer, was excited to take on Claudette's court case because, again, this is the first time anyone has ever pleaded not guilty. Before a court case, some people rallied around Claudette. People took up with Claudette's case. They related to her. They were supportive of her. Some of the negative responses are some mothers expressed concern about Claudette's actions on letting their own children ride the bus. They were worried that their own children would try to follow in Claudette's footsteps, and they themselves would get arrested or worse. Some people thought Claudette made things harder for everyone. A lot of people in the Black community were upset with Claudette because then maybe police or bus drivers would think that they would also cause troubles on the bus. Right? It seemed like they thought that what Claudette did and her actions made things harder for everyone else that had to ride the bus. Others thought that she should go up north and leave Montgomery if she didn't like the segregation laws or the bus rules. Some people were embarrassed because Claudette had taken action that they had not yet taken. This is a big point in the chapter, is a lot of adults were embarrassed. A lot of adults were embarrassed because they had ridden the bus for years and years, and they hadn't taken action, but a 15-year-old girl did. And they were embarrassed. They were humiliated. and they were upset. After her court case, and she does get found guilty of all 3 charges. She doesn't serve jail time. She just goes on probation. She has to pay a fine. But after she gets found guilty, more and more students seem to turn against her. While in the beginning, people were on her side. After she lost, they start making fun of her and bullying her. And after a court case, people accuse Claudette of being too emotional. Right after she gets found guilty, she starts crying and sobbing in court, and people thought she was too emotional. She had too much feistiness. She was angry, they thought she should have kept her emotions in check. So moving on, I want to focus on this word integrity because it sort of highlights the word that showcases Claudette's actions the best. So integrity is a noun. The definition is quality of being honest or having strong morals. Again, morals is whether you know right from wrong. An example of having good morals is if you saw a wallet on the street, like a random wallet, if you have good morals, you would turn it in or try to find the person it belonged to. Having bad morals is keeping the wallet and taking the cash in it, right? Some synonyms is honesty, honor, fair. So the question I want to pose after showing you the definition and synonyms of the word integrity is, how did the positive reactions that Claudette got for her actions speak to her integrity? I think that people acknowledge that Claudette's actions took strength and courage, right? It took strength and courage to stand up for what was wrong. And if you stand up for what's wrong and you stand up for justice and you fight for justice, that is an example of having strong morals. She stood up and fought for justice for her people and her community. It wasn't just for herself. She wanted to make a change for everybody involved, right? So that sort of speaks to her integrity. And you might be thinking, if people thought what she did took strength and courage, right? Why were there so many negative viewpoints about her? And that's the question that comes up next, is why do you think there were so many different responses or different viewpoints to Claudette's actions on the bus? And there's a lot of different answers to this. One of them is no one had ever done anything like Claudette before, right? Pleading not guilty. So people didn't know how to react, right? If something gets done that you've never seen before, you sort of get shocked. You don't know how to react right from the beginning. And challenging a system like Jim Crow was complicated, right? Jim Crow has been around for a very long time. It's sort of a staple in their lives, a very reoccurring theme. And challenging a system like that was complicated because it put people's lives at risk, right? So people don't know how to react. It may make things harder for them. It may try to create change that may make their lives better in the future. People just don't know how to react to it at the time. And one of the biggest reasons is people don't have all the facts, right? From the last lesson, I showed you a police report of what the cops said happened and what Claudette said happened, right? They were telling the same, they were explaining the same situation, but the stories were completely different, right? Claudette said she didn't hurt the police officer, she didn't fight back, she was limp like a baby, and the police report said that she fought and scratched and kicked the police officers, right? So people didn't have all the facts. And if you don't have all the facts, you're going to spin the story your own different way, right? You're going to gossip. You're going to create rumors, right? Which made it hard to get the right information. So a lot of misinformation and a lot of rumors and gossip was getting spread around instead of the stone cold facts. Like if I told someone a story and they told another person and that person told another person and went all the way down until there's a difference of me and 100 people down since I started telling the story. My story and the last person that heard that story are going to be completely different, right? Because the people telling my story to the person down the line may put their own spin on it, right? They may put their own spin on it, which completely changes the story. So that's why a lot of different viewpoints were shown about Claudette and her actions, because we don't know where they got all the information from. Someone may have just read the police report and thought, oh, wow, this Claudette is a very bad apple, right? Or if you just listen to Claudette's telling of the story, you think, okay, Claudette fought for injustice, she didn't fight back, and she's getting charged wrongly, right, for her crimes whenever she didn't do anything, right? So that's why there are so many different viewpoints to Claudette's actions, and hopefully that makes sense. Quickly assessing sources. This is important because you are going to access sources for your research paper at the end. So assessing sources, I want to focus on primary and secondary sources. So a primary source, right, is a direct or first-hand account that provides unaltered information. And a secondary source is an account that interprets, describes, analyzes, or summarizes information from primary sources. So an example of a primary source is the advertisements I showed you about hair, the police report I showed you, the video of Rosa Parks, the original Rosa Parks of Claudette Colvin's interview. That's an example of a primary source. An example of a secondary source is this book. Like, this book is a secondary source because a lot of it's from the author summarizing events or narrating it himself. But this book, while it is firstly a secondary source, there are primary sources in it. So it's sort of like a collage of primary and secondary sources. The examples of primary source in this book, again, are the police reports, a lot of the pictures, and Claudette Colvin narrating it herself, right, from her point of view. So this book is firstly a secondary source, but there are primary sources in it. Hopefully that makes sense. So who's this book again? Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice, a secondary primary source. I just answered it. It is a secondary source, but it has primary sources in it as well. We are going to skip this right for now and focus on your work time. Chapter 5, you will be having a major grade test. I think it'll be 10 multiple choice questions uploaded sometime this week, and you will also have a chapter 1 through 5 quiz. One of them is a major grade. It'll always be labeled as a major grade, so look out for that. If you have any questions, email me or message me on Schoology. But other than that, that is it for today's lesson video, and I'll see you here next time.